Welcome to For the Common Good with Juanita, a show where we inform, inspire, and empower our businesses, our communities, and people just like you. I am really excited about the show today. Today, the title of the show is When the Trumpet Sounds. And our guest on the show today is Tanisha Graves. And I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's a nationally renowned health educator, an advocate, and entrepreneur, and founder of two nonprofit corporations, Operation Love Incorporated and When the Trumpet Sounds, advocating for the epilepsy community. She's a proud wife, mother, grandmother, and civic leader, has 2 associate degrees with a certification in evangelism, a bachelor and a master's degree in theology, and currently working on her doctorate degree in biblical counseling. So please help me welcome to the show, Ms. Tanisha Graves. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell, for having me.
I am so excited to have you on the show today to shed light about epilepsy and SUDEP, and we'll tell you what that is in a moment.
Yes.
But first of all, help us to understand exactly what epilepsy is, because I think a lot of people are really confused about what it actually is.
Well, a lot of people feel that epilepsy has a lot to do with demonic spirits. But what it actually has to do with is the misfiring of the electrical frequencies of the actual brain. And where the individual who's actually having that seizure is not able to control one's reaction because the brain is misfiring.
Okay, wow. Okay, so I know that in creating awareness, you also talk about SUDEP, is it called?
Yes.
So help us to understand exactly what SUDEP is.
SUDEP is actually known for sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. My son actually passed away from it on Labor Day of 2019. He was actually found in bed in fetal position. Most often people are actually found in prone position, which their face is actually down in their bed or in their pillow. And so we're trying to still understand why SUDEP happens. And also what makes certain individuals turn over into that prone position that ends their life.
Wow. Yeah, I'm learning myself here. So does it happen at certain ages? Is it more common among infants or young children or older? Is there anything?
It can hit at any age, any time.
Wow.
It's always the individual has some kind of history of being epileptic. So in my son's case, he had tonic-clonic seizures, which is the most severe forms of seizures, where he would fall down. He could be talking to you one minute, next minute he's down on the floor. With stiffening of the body, loss of control of, his saliva, urination. It affects the body in a lot of different ways. You will see them like kind of clench up and just constantly shake nonstop until the seizure subsides.
And I'm really sorry to hear about the passing of your son.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for sharing your story and shedding light on this illness. So when did you learn that your son had epilepsy?
Well, I woke up one morning at the age of 5 months. To him, I thought he was hiccuping. I heard about seizures before, but never seen anyone have one. So that was like the furthest thing from my mind. And so got him a bottle. It was like 4:30 in the morning, put the bottle in his mouth. He didn't latch on to it. I said, something is wrong. Turn the light on. Turn the light on, and he's purple all over. And it was nothing but by the grace of God that we were like right across the street from EMS. And when they got to the home, they said if it had been 3 or 4 minutes longer, he would never have survived that.
Wow. Wow. So I want to talk a little bit more about your son's journey. Now, how old was your son?
He passed at the age of 26. He had
Okay.
a mind of a 3 to 5 year old. He could never walk outside by himself. He had to always have someone to accompany him any and everywhere that he went.
So is that because of the disease, what it does to the
Yes.
brain? Okay.
When he first started having, he knew sign language. He knew, certain foods that he loved, enjoyed
Right.
cooking. He would get in the kitchen. He would actually prepare those
Right.
meals. But the more and more seizures that he had, the less of the actual brain function of the things that he was used to doing, he could no longer do anymore.
Wow. So there are different levels of progression with people. I want to help the viewers to understand a little bit about, because I assume there's so many people that don't know about, they've heard things about epilepsy, but they don't really understand it and the impact that it has.
Right. And looking at someone who's epileptic, they look like a normal person every day, until you actually see that, hey, they do have a disability. So there is a lot of stigma that comes along with it.
Did your son face that stigma? Did you see that in his case with people?
I would say I was a very assertive parent. And so certain things I was very vocal on. But, as the years went on dealing with medical professionals.
Even in the medical profession?
Yes.
You saw that? Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yes. And we went through a number of things. So as we went through those things, I had become a very fearful parent. Then I became very complacent because I didn't know who I can trust to actually care for my son and give him the best care that was needed. And so I kept a lot of things to myself because really, truly, I didn't know who to turn to.
Wow. So having a child with epilepsy and all the family support, I mean, is there support there, did you find, for the family, for children who have epilepsy?
In Marquise's case, there was a lot of support.
Oh.
But oftentimes you had people who are in the communities who would cross paths with him that didn't understand that he did have a disability. So oftentimes you actually see the parents grabbing their kids and pulling the kids behind their back. And, some adults can be a little bit worse than the kids these days. And so it tugged on my heart because I knew what type of child that I had and the love that he had for people. And so I used to oftentimes tell him, come on, son, they don't understand. And he was like, Mama, I got this. And so I had to allow him the opportunity to have it.
Wow. And so he learned to navigate through all of that.
Yes. He just loved people. He had a great love for people. He didn't look at race or anything. He just loved people.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that journey with us, about your son. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we are going to hear more about Tanisha's journey with epilepsy and all the work that she's doing to help educate other people, which it definitely sounds like we need to do more of that.
Yes.
We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. You've been listening to For the Common Good with Juanita. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Common Good with Juanita. And we've been talking to Tanisha Tyler Graves, and we're talking about SUDEP and epilepsy. And SUDEP is the sudden unexpected death
in epilepsy.
And I think a lot of people don't know about SUDEP. So this is really it's important for us to share this message. And Tanisha losing her son to SUDEP.
Yes.
How has faith played a role in your life? I can't even imagine, sitting here in my shoes, what you've been through. But there's something that got you through that.
Well, I'm going to say that if it had not been for God, when I was told that it was nothing else that they could actually do for my son, I didn't have an identity as to who Tanisha was. And so all I knew was how to be a mother, a wife, and a caretaker. And I was asking God to take my life because I felt like I was a failure, you know, because parents are what? Supposed to protect their children. And, you know, when this fatality happened, I wasn't able to be there.
Did you have other children
Yes.
during that time?
Yes.
And so how are you there for, I mean, of course you're a mother and you have to be, for your other children, you know, going through what you were going through with your son?
It was very challenging, but what I'm thankful most for is that my children were trained to know what to do when their brother had a seizure. They knew how to give him his medications. Even when there was times that I had to be away and be at work, when my mother wasn't able to provide for him, my children stood in and my husband stood in to be of help. So that helped me to get like a little breather, you know.
Wow. Wow. You know, I want to talk about caregiving because caregiving is so important. And, you know, in healthcare, a lot of times people say that, you know, when you're a caregiver, the stress and the strain that it puts on you, on your body, on your mind, across the board. How can you talk about that? You know, the kind of, you know, what caregivers have to deal with?
Well, they have to go through a lot of making sure that the children have their medications on time, taking them to doctor's appointments, making sure that they're eating, getting enough sleep. A lot of times with epileptic patients, because their brain are wired a different sort of way, you have days where they may be up for 24 to 72 hours.
Oh, my goodness.
You may have time where they may have epileptic seizures, status seizures, to where there's no ending to the seizures. You have to give emergency medications in order to try to stop the seizures from keep on progressing. So it's a lot that the caregivers go through, and it does a lot to your mental. But I tell people, you have to have your faith in line. You have to know who God is in order to be able to go through this.
Wow. You have to have something to hold on
Yes.
to, that faith, because without that, it really would be
Yes.
challenging. Were there other challenges? Your son's name was Marquis.
Yes.
Tell us about Marquis.
Marquise was a young man who loved all people. And it was oftentimes that we went into like grocery stores or just a doctor's office, and anyone that came in contact with him, he would hold the door until everybody was out of sight, letting everybody know, hey, my name is Marquise Devon Chapman, and this is my mother, or whoever is standing there with him. He would address people and say, hey, this is who this is. And, you know, he was just so loving. Not saying that he was a perfect child, because everybody has a side to them. But, you know, he was a child that if he did something wrong, once his brain settled down, he would say, Mama, Marquise is sorry. You know, Marquise didn't mean that. You know, and so how could you not love on him even that much harder? Because you know that he didn't have that control at that moment.
Wow. Yeah. So what about your family members? I mean, how did you explain to your family members? I mean, not just your immediate family, but your extended family. Did you get support from your extended family? How is that for most people?
We did have support, but it was very limited because a lot of people were fearful that if they had him in their care,
that's right.
that something may happen to him on their watch. So a lot of people was like, no, we can't do this. And so I went to my mother, and my mom was actually a nurse. And I said, Mom, we don't trust Marquise with just anybody. We need someone that's going to be there for him 100% that we trust.
Right.
And so my mom left her job in order to actually take care of him. And that allowed me and my husband to be able to go to work and to provide for our family.
You know, I hadn't actually thought about that, is that some people would be fearful of just being responsible.
Yeah, because you're facing the unknown. You just don't know.
You don't know. Is there any warning sign that you get that the person is about to go into a seizure or anything?
Some people have aura. Aura is like you get like a taste in your mouth. Some people say it's a really bad taste in your mouth. Other people say they can smell things like it's burning. In Marquise's case, he started off that way, but over time, he started to thirst for excessive water. So he would thirst between 32 and 40 ounces of water drinking 5 to maybe 8 cups at a time before he went into a full tonic-clonic seizure.
Wow.
And he came running to me and sat in my lap and said, "Mama," and before he fell out.
Wow. Wow. And I guess it affects people differently.
Yes, it does.
The disease. And so you have to sort of learn and understand
Yes.
for that person and how it impacts them,
Yes.
affects them. Wow. It's an amazing, amazing story. So when we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about services. If there are enough services out there, what can we do better? I mean, as a society, we have to do better.
Yes.
Because there are people who are living with this illness and who are, dying from this illness, and we still don't understand enough about it. And there's a stigma associated with it. And I think, as many other diseases and illnesses, there are stigmas. People don't want to talk about it. They just kind of want to push it over here and just, make it go away. But it's not going away, and there are people being impacted. And I am so thankful that you are shining the light today.
Thank you.
On SUDEP and on epilepsy. So we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Don't you go anywhere. Welcome back to For the Common Good with Juanita. And I'm talking today to Tanisha Tyler Graves, and we're talking about epilepsy and SUDEP. And we're talking, her son passed away from epilepsy through SUDEP. And SUDEP, again, I just want to remind the audience, is
sudden unexpected death in epilepsy.
And it's probably more common than we think.
Yes.
So I just want to ask you quickly, SUDEP, I've never even heard the term. So tell me, how common is that in epilepsy?
Well, what data actually shows is 1 out of 1,000 that would die from SUDEP, but that is a great undercounting. What we're finding out more is that it's more prevalent. But what's happening is, instead of it being notated on the actual medical report, it's going down as cardiopulmonary arrest, which means that the monies is actually being sent into the Heart and Lung Association and not into the brain studies. So we're now trying to get the medical examiners to pay more attention to put epilepsy or SUDEP as the first diagnosis, and then everything else as the second.
Wow, I would have never thought that. That's interesting. Let's talk about the services, because I can imagine, because of the stigma and just the lack of knowledge, that the services are just not sufficient to sort of help with and understand and to treat epilepsy. So can you talk a little bit about the services that are being provided and the lack of services too?
Well, when my son was living, I had a big gap in services being provided. Yes, we did get someone who could provide nursing care for him when I had to be away from home. But when it came to like medical devices or things that could have been beneficial to alert us if something happened through the course of the night, we were often told that insurance wouldn't pay for it or that we would be up all night. But later on, after my son's passing, we actually found an organization called Danny Did that is an actual device company that I actually started to purchase these said devices because I didn't want the parents to actually go through the very thing that we had just gone through. And over time, I actually became one of their ambassadors.
Oh my goodness. Now you have 2 businesses.
Yes.
I want to talk about your organizations and what do you do to reach out to communities? What's that like?
I always be a listening ear. You know, you never know when that time may just be your time. So with Operation Love, we're a food ministry, and we feed between 130 to 170 people every week out of pocket, a handful of us. We do holiday assistance. We do back to school.
And this is for the general community,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
So people can see you, understand you, know more about what you do,
yes.
too.
Yes.
That's great. Good outreach. Yeah.
And so when the Trumpet Sounds is our health portion.
Okay.
We started with epilepsy because that was dear to our heart, because we lost our gym to it. But we're working on everything across the board that addresses any type of health care, whether it be stigma or disparities.
Wow. And how do you address stigma? That is always the golden question, because in some communities it's worse than other communities. There's more stigma in some communities. And, you know, the way people see this illness, can you talk about that, the stigma?
It has to be more education and awareness.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you find those who actually live with the life of epilepsy, a lot of them don't talk about their epilepsy because, one, they don't like the point that they actually have it in the first place. Two, they don't know how people are going to perceive it on the other end. So a lot of them won't say a word. And then you have some who actually have family members who still look at that demonic spirit thing that has been put out. So a lot of times they're not even.
So where does that come from? Because I have not heard that demonic spirit, but I can imagine that that's, you know, and that's what people think about epilepsy, that it's a demonic spirit.
They actually call them fits, you know. And I said, what is a fit? You know, epilepsy or seizures is no different than any other disorder, but it was already characterized as a fit.
It's probably like mental illness or something like that. People think mental illness is something you can just control, right? You know, you're just it's just evil.
Yeah. And some people think that seizure patients sometimes put on their seizures. You know, you don't understand. So because you don't understand, you're they're putting on the front.
Wow, I see. That's why we're talking about this today, because it's so important to dispel these myths and understand exactly what we're dealing with here, epilepsy, understand it. And so there's still so much help that's needed for families, and you're part of that with your organizations. But on a national basis, are there enough organizations out there on the front line?
Never enough, because it needs to be more voices at the table that's not afraid to actually address what families are actually enduring at the hands of seizures and epilepsy. You know, and we have to become people who are not fearful to actually speak up, because the medical researchers, the mental health professionals and doctors, they need to hear, hey, we are here, we care, you know, and we thank you for your medical degree, but the real experts are the ones who's actually enduring, because we are the ones who can actually give you the information that's needed.
Right. Information and, you know, just the practical experience of dealing with it day to day.
Yes.
So, Tanisha, I thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, I just thank you so much for what you're doing to shed light on epilepsy and SUDEP and all the work, you know, with your organizations that you every day trying to make people understand, help people to understand that this is real. Families are dealing with this every day, and you need help. You need help, and you need the medical community. I think that's one of the important messages out of this too. You need the medical community to pay attention. And hear you. So thank you so much. Now, if someone listening wanted to know more about how to reach you, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Well, we have a website, www.whenthetrumpetsounds.com. We also have an 800 number, which is 800-220-5605, extension 1, which is a helpline.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is awesome. And the information will also be posted in our credits at the end of the show. So thank you again for joining us on For the Common Good.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. And thank you for tuning in to For the Common Good with Juanita. We'll see you next time.